the last time we saw Bobby Boucher. He went from the Raging Cajuns to the Texas Longhorns to the LSU Tigers, where it turns out that Bobby had an incredible season. Bobby Boucher had absolutely dominated the SEC. He was practically unguardable for even the top offensive lines in the country, and in a season where he was able to lead his team to an SEC title, he would become just the third defensive player to ever win a Heisman Trophy, clearly establishing himself as the best player in the nation, all while eventually leading his team to the national championship, where against Louisville the Waterboy continued to obliterate the competition, ultimately helping to bring the Tigers back to the top of the college football world, winning a national championship in what many people consider to be one of the greatest college football seasons of all time. Which brings us to today, where Bobby Boucher has some decisions to make on his future in football. He could either stay at LSU, transfer to a new school, or potentially take his talents to the NFL. But after taking some time to talk over it with Mama, Bobby decided that he's going to go back to school and get his education. And around that same time, he was actually getting married to his girlfriend Vicky. So everything was going great for Bobby, but then all of a sudden,
Bobby, it's me, your daddy, Roberto. You know, I seen you on the ESPN when they was talking about you being drafted by the NFL.
Bobby's daddy showed up and made him realize that he could make a lot more money in the NFL. So after talking about it with Mama again and Vicky, Bobby Boucher finally makes a decision on his future.
I'm gonna go do it. This is the best day of my life.
And now Bobby Boucher, after having an immaculate college career, he decides that he has done everything that he could possibly do in college, and it's time for him to start playing at the next level. But first, Bobby is working on what kind of player he's going to be once he gets to the league. And it looks like he's going to end up as a blitzing linebacker comparable to guys like Patrick Queen. But something tells me he'll be better than Patrick Queen. Now at this point, Bobby is just ready to get things going with the NFL Combine. And the first drill that he is doing out here is a 40-yard dash where he ends up running a 4.33. Easily one of the fastest linebackers in the draft and probably one of the fastest players overall. Now it turns out that Bobby would actually dominate this combine. And you know what, I'm just realizing that Bobby put on a ton of muscle. So I think that, along with the fact that he had put on an amazing combine performance, is probably why he's projected to be a top 5 pick in the upcoming draft. But before Bobby gets to the draft, he has to take care of these combine interviews. And he's doing a pretty good job answering questions from NFL GMs. It's looking like these GMs are liking what they're hearing from Bobby, and he feels confident now that he is officially heading into the NFL draft. Now Bobby knows no matter where he goes, he'll likely end up playing halfway across the country. The good news is that he would find out soon after he was finally getting a call from the New Orleans Saints. It turns out that Bobby Boucher wasn't going to have to go anywhere, because with the 5th pick in the NFL draft, the New Orleans Saints were taking Bobby Boucher, who they were bringing in to help make the Saints a competitive team again and potentially lead them to their 2nd Super Bowl championship. Now after officially signing with the New Orleans Saints, Bobby is ready to get things going as he heads into his rookie season. In training camp, he was looking like a guy who could be a real playmaker, and the coaches were liking what they were seeing. But now that Bobby's in the NFL, he has a lot more responsibility, because some of his weekly activities now consist of him having to make a choice between spending time with the fans or spending more time with his new wife. And based on what he chooses, he'll be able to build up his sphere of influence, which you guys can see Coach Klein, Mama, and Vicky are all at the top. But eventually, it is now time for Bobby to make his NFL preseason debut, where he's going to play a couple snaps here against the Chargers. Now, unsurprisingly for many people, it did not take long for Bobby Boucher to start making an impact. He was already showing what his capabilities could be as a run defender. But on the same drive, he showed that opposing teams will have a hard time passing against him as well, as he helps combine for his first career sack to put an end to this drive. And you know what, man, the coaches had already seen enough, bro. They are taking Bobby out, and they already know that he's going to end up being a major part of this team. Now, in the second preseason game, Bobby actually wasn't playing at all. So that made him even more confused when after the game he found out that he would actually not be the starter. 76-year-old Demario Davis will maintain his spot, but Bobby made it clear that he's still going to come out here and compete for this job. He came out here in the final preseason game against the Broncos where he helped combine for another sack. And that's really all he could get done before eventually being taken out for the rest of the game once again, and after Bobby was now having another talk with his head coach Kellen Moore about Bobby continuing to compete for the starting job. And Bobby reiterates that he is not here to sit on the sidelines. So even though Bobby knew that he wasn't going to be a starter to begin the season, he continued to work hard in practice doing all sorts of crazy drills like this one, and showed the coaches that he was willing to work for a starting job eventually. But it was clear that Bobby was not happy coming off the bench going into his first NFL game. where at home against the Cardinals, he is finally making his NFL debut halfway through the third quarter. That was kind of crazy because as soon as Bobby got in, Kyler Murray was looking so petrified that he forgot to snap the ball, causing an early flag in his possession, and Bobby Boucher is already making an impact. A couple plays later, the Saints defense brings them to a 3rd down and 2, where they come up with a stop, and they would have another chance to get a stop here, having the Cardinals backed up against their own goal line. And now Bobby felt like it might be time for him to make a play by saying, "Wang!" Bobby Boucher smacked the shit out of James Conner, and he gave the Saints all the momentum to come up with the win, but it's too bad that they don't. The Cardinals take the win in the first game of the season by 1 point, but Bobby was not too upset, because now Kellen Moore was giving Bobby the chance to become the starter. He liked what he did last game, and he knows that he's only just going to keep improving. And eventually they'd be ready to get back into another home game at the Superdome. The New Orleans Saints have a chance to get their first win of the season. But the question is, will they be able to do it against the San Francisco 49ers, who are already talking crazy to Bobby on the first play of the game?
Bring it to the hole! You're a smart! Woo! Woo! Woo!
You sound like a big choo-choo train. Powerbomb. Complimented Captain Insano.
Bobby Boucher was stupefying CMC like he was in Harry Potter. But that was only the beginning for Bobby and his defense as they dominate the 49ers on this opening possession. And really all throughout the first half, they continued to come up with stops on 3rd down. And even when 4th down came around, the Niners offense had a hard time dealing with the Saints pass rush. Bringing us to the 4th quarter where the Saints are up 21 points and Bobby is helping to put a stop to this play with a tackle for loss. But even though the Niners did eventually go downfield and put some points up on the board, it was a little too late for all that because the Saints were sending them back home to the Bay, getting a 21-7 W here led by Bobby Boucher in the Saints defense. And with the Waterboy improving so much since he's got to the Saints, his teammates are already wanting him to become a leader. And of course Bobby's going to be ready for that after he just led his team to a national championship as the best player in the country. Now Bobby's just taking care of some of his weekly activities and upgrading some of his pass rush moves because he still hasn't even come up with a sack yet on his career. He's had a few TFLs, but he'll definitely be chasing a sack in his next game, where the first time all season the Saints will be traveling on the road to face off against the 12th man and the Seattle Seahawks. Now early on, even though Bobby was shedding off blockers, the Seahawks were still coming up with big plays. Eventually though, the Saints bring him to a 3rd down where they come up with a stop, holding the Seahawks to 3 points on the drive. By the end of the 3rd quarter, this game is still tied at 3, but the Seahawks are challenging to change that by moving themselves well within field goal range, and Bobby actually picks up his first flag in the NFL, taking us to a 3rd down and 11 where the Saints would bring down Sam Darnold again. A big play that holds them to 3 points, but they still had the lead by the next drive. So Bobby now knew that it was time to start making some plays to help his team. And on back-to-back plays, he was stopping this running back for a loss, allowing his team to get the ball back with a chance to take the lead in the final moments of the game. But unfortunately, they could not pick up any points and the Saints would lose another game on the season. Bobby was starting to realize that his offense was kind of garbage, so that meant that he had to be even better. And in order to do so, he decided to call up his now good friend, Captain Insano. He had to learn some moves from him and figure out what it is he can do to be better, because going into their next game, they will be on the road once again. This time facing off against one of the best teams in the league though, as they will be traveling on the road to take on Josh Allen and the Bills. Now early on in this game, Bobby and the Saints defense was chasing around Josh Allen and coming up with a sack, putting a stop to them on their opening drive and allowing the Saints to go up by 7 points. Now Bobby was out here still trying to come up with his first sack, but it seems like everybody else was making plays before him. Shout out Isaac Yaudo. Eventually though, the Bills would find a way to get themselves in field goal range twice before the half, bringing us to a 10-6 ball game in the second half where apparently Josh Allen is unguardable. He is bringing this ball well across field into scoring position for the Bills. The Saints again would bring them to another 3rd down where Bobby's pass rush was creating some pressure, forcing a wild throw that ends up falling incomplete, bringing us to a 10-9 ball game where the Saints are struggling to put up more points. And it's looking like that's not going to be a problem for the Bills as Josh Allen is taking this ball all the way to the crib for a touchdown, finally giving the Bills the lead, and they would maintain it until late in the 4th quarter, where after failing to stop Josh Allen again on this 3rd down, this game looked like it was about to be over. The Bills were running down the clock and were about to put this one away until Bobby Boucher forces a fumble that is recovered by the Saints, forcing a fumble that gives his team a chance to take the lead, which they eventually do. Unfortunately though, this Bills offense is still operating at a high level, and they got themselves into field goal range to tie this game up and send it into overtime, where after Bobby had obliterated this Bills running back on back-to-back plays, he was giving his team a chance to win the game, but unfortunately they couldn't. The good thing is though, neither could the Bills, and this one would end up in a tie. This one would end 18-18 in a game where Bobby had probably his best performance of the season. 15 tackles and 5 tackles for loss was starting to turn him into a household name. So much so to the point where his daddy decided to reach out again and try and convince Bobby to become business partners.
Take the money! You and me could be partners, just like that Tiger Woods and his daddy.
Now, of course, Bobby chose to spend some time with Mama, but he also chose to work on his skills. He was hoping that this would be a game where he came up with his first sack, and he would have a good chance to do so going against one of the worst offensive lines in the league with the New York Giants. Now, it took until the second quarter, but Bobby Boucher would start making his impact felt, helping his defense bring the Giants to a third down where they would eventually come up with a stop. It would take until the end of the third quarter for the Giants to get down the field and put some points up to tie this game up at 7. But by the end of this game, Bobby was destroying this offensive line, and he and the Saints defense were chasing around Jameis Winston for a sack. A huge play in front of the home crowd that gives the Saints their second win of the season, closing this one out 10-7 against the Giants in another game where Bobby had dominated. Bobby was getting used to filling up the stat sheet, and he looked to do the same thing here against the Patriots as he came up with his first full sack of his career. Bobby was taking down Drake May to try and set the tone for the team going forward. But somehow all that did was just really set the tone for New England, because they were having no problem making their way downfield, bringing us to a first down and 10 where an inside run up the middle somehow allows Antonio Gibson to make his way to the end zone for a score, giving New England a lead that they would maintain and even add to here in the first half. Soon though, Bobby is out here really doing his part to try and get his team back in position to take the lead. But there was really nothing Bobby can do when his secondary was getting cooked up like some eggs at a hibachi restaurant, and allowed the Patriots back into scoring territory where after Drake May rolls out to his right on this play, they come up with a touchdown to extend their lead further. And even though the Saints did put up some points, it definitely wasn't enough, especially as the Pats would score another touchdown, doing enough to hand the Saints another loss on the season, dropping this one 31-17, and the Saints knew that they had to start stringing together some wins, especially if they wanted any chance at competing in the playoffs. Unfortunately though, it looks like this next game will be a tough one to compete in, as the Saints are now traveling to Chicago in some treacherous weather, where they will be facing off against the Bears. Now this was a game where Bobby Boucher was dominating all throughout the first half. The Bears didn't seem ready to play in their own weather, and the Waterboy was taking advantage of it by taking Caleb Williams down for a sack. Now Bobby would continue to make his impact felt here in the second half. Even when the Bears got down to the goal line, the Waterboy was handing out free CTE like some candy on Halloween, bringing us to a second down and 9 where Bobby throws off the center and sacks Caleb Williams for the second time in the game, ultimately leading to a 4th down and 16 where the Saints would come up with the stop and get themselves back in the win column. They come out with a 17-5 victory, and Bobby Boucher was the talk of the football world. It got to the point where Coach Redboy U at Ohio State couldn't even believe what he was seeing. So he realized that he might have to start plotting again to get his revenge on Bobby Boucher. But that's going to be tough to do so based on how the Saints have been feeling. They know that with Bobby Boucher leading their defense, they have a chance to make a run in the playoffs.
You can do it!
We're here in a game against the Tampa Bay Bucks where Bobby Boucher is once again making plays to help his team out. And in a game where neither team was able to put up more than one touchdown, Bobby was out here making the game-saving tackle, allowing his team to come up with another win to put them over 500 on the season. They took down a divisional opponent, but soon they will be facing off against one of the best teams in the NFC West, where the Saints will be on the road to face off against Matt Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams. Now, unfortunately, this game felt a lot more different than any other game Bobby had played throughout the season. This Rams offense was high-flying and was torching the Saints offense early, bringing us to the end of the second quarter where the Rams already had the lead, but they continued to add to it by scoring another touchdown. And even by the second half, it didn't seem like there was much the Saints defense can do as Kyren Williams was smacking a defender, getting in for another touchdown that put his team up by 2 possessions, but Bobby made sure to get his revenge by smacking him right back. Unfortunately though, this was just a game where that Rams offense was dominating all throughout, and by the end of this one, they were coming up with a 21-13 victory, handing the Saints another loss on the season in a game where Bobby was pretty much neutralized all throughout. Easily his worst performance of the year so far. But as far as his stats throughout the year, Bobby had been playing incredible. When comparing what he has done throughout the season to his teammates' entire career, Bobby looks like he's on pace to have a spectacular season. He just has to pick things back up as he heads into another game against a division rival, as they will be heading to Charlotte to face off against the Carolina Panthers. Now this game was tied at 0 into the second half, which is where Bobby actually comes up with his first sack of the day. A big play that might be able to give his team some momentum going forward, and he continued to build on that momentum by sacking Bryce Young again on 3rd down, putting an end to the Panthers drive and hopefully allowing the Saints to take the lead, but they do not. Once again though, it is Bobby making plays in the backfield to help push his opponent behind the sticks, bringing us to a third down where the Panthers actually find a way to move the sticks, bringing them into field goal range. But here on another third down, Bobby comes up with his third sack of the day. He figured that might be enough to push Carolina out of field goal range, but this is where he knew for sure that he is not in college anymore, because the kickers at this level can make these kicks, and the Panthers definitely did to take a 3-0 victory. This is one of the most disappointing losses in the season for the Saints, as they failed to put up a single point. And it was in another game where Bobby put up an incredible performance, having 2.5 sacks and 4 TFLs. But you know what, Bobby was still working with his defensive coordinator to figure out what they can do to be better, because at this point in the year, it does not look like they have a chance to make the playoffs. But the Saints are going to have to try and find a way to turn things around as they head into the back half of their season, starting right here in another home game against the Falcons. Now early on, it looks like the Falcons are going to run all over the Saints, because after Bijan Robinson shrugs off Bobby Boucher, he finds a way to get around the edge and get in the end zone for a score, seemingly setting the tone for Atlanta. But by the second half, this game would be 17-14 with the Saints leading. And this is where Bobby would begin to make his impact with his first sack of the day, ultimately helping his team get to a 2-possession lead in the fourth quarter, where this pass rush seemed to be just too much for the Falcons, with the Saints now picking up their 4th sack of the game and also picking up their 5th win of the season. The Saints were taking care of business against a division rival, but they had to stay locked in if they wanted to do the same thing going into Miami to take on the Dolphins. Against Miami, Bobby and his defense were dominating throughout the first half, as Bobby comes up with his first sack of the game to push the Dolphins back, but it wouldn't be long after where Miami came up with a play to get them across the goal line and tie this game up at 7. And now all of a sudden it seems like Tua feels comfortable talking trash to Bobby.
Ooh, I'm a football player.
Bobby was coming up with a huge play to stop the Dolphins and send this game to overtime, where with the Dolphins now backed up against their own goal line, it was actually Cameron Jordan coming up with a game-winning safety to give the Saints their 2nd straight win, closing this one out 9-7, and Bobby felt great about getting into the rest of the season, because at this point in the year, the Saints have a playoff spot, but all they have to do is just keep winning. But they would have to find a way to do so going against the 7-5 Buccaneers on the road. Now, although the Waterboy does rush the passer a lot, he can still come out here and say "Wang" as he comes up with his first career interception to start this game off. A huge turnover that puts the Saints up 7 and sets the tone for them going forward, bringing us to a 3rd down and 4 here, where the Bucs are responding right back with a big play. They take this one all the way upfield for a touchdown to tie this game up. But by the second quarter, Bobby was out here saying shablaka to these running backs, and all of a sudden Tampa Bay's offense was scared to move the ball downfield even into the 4th quarter, because Bobby was beginning to live in their backfield until the Saints had a 2-possession lead in the 4th quarter, where even though Baker Mayfield would find Mike Evans over the middle, who somehow made a play and outran the entire defense for a touchdown, it wasn't going to be enough to make up for the deficit, as the Saints would take their 3rd straight victory, closing this one out 17-14 in another solid game from Bobby Boucher, who was continuing to have an amazing rookie season for the Saints, and he wanted to keep it up heading into another game against Carolina. But early on, it looks like the Panthers are going to be a problem once again for New Orleans, as they score a long touchdown to take a 7-0 lead. Now, Bobby was doing his best to come up with stops for the Saints though, putting a great move on this offensive lineman before bringing down Bryce Young, coming up with his first sack of the night here in the 2nd quarter, and eventually in the second half, he was bringing down Bryce Young again. It looked like the Saints were about to come away with the win in this game, especially after Bobby comes up with his 3rd sack of the day. He was dominating this Panthers offense, yet somehow on his 2nd down and 16, Bryce would find a way to get out of the pocket and make a play that brought his team into field goal range, putting them in position to come up with a 10-7 victory, as the Saints now move to 7-6-1 on the season, despite Bobby having one of his best games of his career. He was even being congratulated by his agent for winning Defensive Player of the Week. And that was nice and all, but it was more important that the Saints get back on track and keep themselves in the playoff race by coming up with a win against the Jets. Now, throughout the season, one thing Bobby was learning how to do was time the snap and come up with tackles in the backfield. He was becoming a defensive menace for teams, and especially Justin Fields. Oh my God, Bobby Boucher knocked his lights out. But he wasn't done there, because soon after, Bobby was coming up with a sack before half to stop the Jets from putting up another 3 points. And then after half, Bobby was obliterating this lineman before helping to bring down Justin again. He was an absolute problem for the Jets all throughout this game, and even into the 4th quarter, where he's coming up with his 3rd sack of the night. Bobby Boucher has to pinch himself just to make sure he isn't dreaming, because he almost can't believe that he is dominating the Jets to this level. Bringing us to a 2nd and 7, where for the 3rd time this season, the Saints are coming up with a safety, as Pete Werner comes up with a sack to give the Saints the lead, And just like that, they are back in the win column. They take a disgusting 5-3 victory, but a win is a win. And led by the Waterboy, who had another great game, the Saints have clinched a playoff spot, solidifying themselves as the winner of the division with only 2 games left. And just like that, the Saints are back to being a competitive team. So everything was going great for Bobby until he would eventually find out that Coach Red Boy U had gotten himself into the NFL as a defensive coordinator. He was officially part of the Rams coaching staff where he was already taking his revenge on Bobby. Because it turns out that Coach Red Boy U would locate Bobby Boucher's #1 fan. And after making some phone calls, he found a way to take him out for good. And soon Bobby had to make a choice between going to an interview or going to his fan's funeral. Now Bobby not only chose to go to the funeral, but he also dedicated the rest of his season to this guy. Now Bobby doesn't know how or why he died, but he does know that he's going to lock in and help close out the regular season for the Saints. Now the Tennessee Titans were absolutely no match for the Saints defense as Bobby was lighting them up all throughout the first half, taking us to the fourth quarter where the Titans still had 0 points, and it was about to stay that way as the Saints took a 14-0 victory. The Saints were on their way to a 10-win season, but all they had to do now was just take down the Falcons, who unfortunately was making it difficult early on as they take a 14-0 lead in the first half. The Saints were down so bad that they decided to put Bobby out there at cornerback, and Bobby actually was playing pretty good coverage and even came up with a pick. Bobby Boucher was locking down his opponent and gave his team some life. Unfortunately, it still wasn't enough though, as the Saints would close out their season with a 14-6 loss. Definitely not the way they wanted to end their regular season, but the good thing is that they will still make the playoffs, and they had Bobby Boucher to lead them into it and help them get to the second round. Because after a season where Bobby had 54 tackles for loss, 18.5 sacks, and 2 interceptions, he had easily established himself as one of the best defensive players in the league. And that's why going into his first ever playoff game, he had the Superdome rocking. He was playing so well that he even had Tyrann Mathieu come out of retirement and help the Saints make something happen on their playoff journey. These Saints fans were looking to see greatness, and being led by Bobby Boucher, they had a chance to be great as they were matching up against the Rams. Now on the very first play of this game, Bobby tries to time up the snap before throwing off this running back and bringing Matt Stafford down to the ground. A huge play from the Waterboy, but Matthew Stafford didn't seem to like it and started talking crazy to Bobby.
Look at me! I'm the Waterboy, dude! I got a wooden spoon, dude!
Bobby Boucher is sacking Matt Stafford for the second time of the drive, forcing the Rams to go 3-and-out on their opening drive, and it seems like the Saints now have a lot of momentum as they end up getting another stop, though this time in field goal range where the Rams would take a 3-point lead. And then all of a sudden the Rams had no problem making plays all over this Rams defense, getting themselves well across the 50 where Bobby was coming up with some incredible gravity-defying tackles. I didn't even know it was possible for somebody to move like this. But it didn't stop there because the Rams would have a chance to put up a touchdown before half, but the Waterboy was making a crazy tackle in the air, stopping the Rams at the goal line and forcing them to settle for another 3 points. Bringing us to the second half where the Saints came up with another stop on the Rams, forcing them to take another field goal that put this game at 9-3, where Bobby was once again timing the snap count and smacking Kyron Williams in the backfield. He had a chance to help his team come back in this game, so Bobby was absolutely locked in, coming up with a TFL on the second straight play. But with this clock ticking down, the Saints would still need to come up with a stop. And it turns out that Bobby Boucher was there to get it done. His third straight tackle in the backfield to give his team the ball back. And now the Saints had a chance to go downfield and win this game. The only question remains is, would this Tyler Show-led offense be able to do it? And it looks like they're about to after getting all the way downfield to the goal line, where they end up getting stopped. And just like that, Bobby Boucher's rookie season was coming to an end, losing to Coach Red Boy U in the Los Angeles Rams 9-3. A very painful loss for Bobby Boucher as he had another incredible game, but there was really just nothing he can do as his offense was not led by competent playmakers. So Bobby was definitely hoping that his team would find some in the offseason, but as far as right now, it turns out that Bobby Boucher would go on to win Defensive Player of the Year. And even though we can't show you his season stats compared to the rest of the players in the league, you can see based on his teammates' career stats that he is on his way to having a Hall of Fame career. But Bobby wants to do more than just make the Hall of Fame, man. He also wants to win a Super Bowl. So that was definitely something Bobby is going to strive for in the future, but for now, this is the end of the Waterboy season in Madden 26. And if you want to see a part 5 of the Waterboy, be sure to get this video to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also be sure to comment down below what else you guys want to see next, and YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you're watching up to this point, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know, and other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.